Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. This is essentially part 3 in the series on the love triangle, or certainly the possibilities of a love triangle between Mo Wilson, Colin Strickland, and Kaitlin Armstrong. She's still on the run and is now approaching 2 weeks. So the 34-year-old yoga instructor, I've seen her referred to as 35 years old. According to my math, she's 34 years old. Kaitlin is still on the run. It's approaching 2 weeks, and at this point, I'm not sure whether the authorities even know which vehicle she's driving or if she's even using a vehicle. But let's focus on what we do know. Let's start with the age differences. He's 35, and is he living with his girlfriend or was she living with him? Whose property was it? In the affidavit, it does refer to him living with his girlfriend. I think the affidavit specifically says lives with his girlfriend. I don't know whether that simply means she lives with him, but it's an odd way to put it. I suppose it could mean she's living with him, but it's also possible he's living with her. That's certainly how I interpreted it. Now, why this is important is to establish things like the power situation in the home, the situation in terms of dependency, basically finding out the real dynamics within this couple and how that may have frayed or been undermined in certain ways. And one way that can be undermined and is commonly undermined is fluctuating income or being codependent because you don't have much money and somebody else does or something like that. So I do think we've got to ask the question, who is the wealthier partner? And also, what was the attraction between Strickland and Armstrong? And why were things sort of not working out? We know they broke up twice. Why was that? And was the relationship sort of in jeopardy because he was becoming more successful? Now, one thing that is quite an interesting clue to this question, potentially, are the 3 vehicles identified in the affidavit: a 2002 BMW motorcycle, a 1998 Mercedes, and a 2012 Jeep Grand Cherokee. And that was the vehicle. The third one was the one that she was driving. Now, obviously, of those 3 vehicles, I would presume the 2012 Jeep Grand Cherokee is the most expensive, which suggests, it implies, and one can possibly infer, that maybe she was more successful financially than he was or had been. So I don't know what his income is as a sponsored athlete. It appears he was having some sort of on-off affair with 25-year-old Mo Wilson. She's 10 years younger than Colin and 9 years younger than Kaitlin. But you can imagine in a situation that was sort of reversed, where it's his home. I'm just saying, if you speculate and you say it's his home and he's cheating, you might not see the same level of angry indignation. On the other hand, I suppose you could say, perhaps if she's getting ready to settle down, she's 34, almost 35, and wants to have kids perhaps before she turns 40, and she's really wanting to get serious now, wanting to be in a serious relationship and be with someone who's committed, and now is this all being jeopardized by a third party? What do you think the answer is to that question? I think the other side of it is, if it is her home and she's going to all this effort to create a serious life together, and meanwhile there are these dalliances going on, you can imagine that can lead to a angry level of indignation. And her father's actually spoken in her defense. I might deal with that in the next episode, but I do think the situation, if he was living with her, that might have been a factor. And then also the age gap, and then also the relative status of Mo. The age gap means there's a younger woman threat. And I think in terms of the relative status thing, I think it goes deeper in that because they operate in the same space as professional athletes, that's Colin and Mo. Also, they are both sponsored. Although not by the same company, and they're both big deals as competitors. They're both sort of stars in cycling. You can see how they have quite a lot in common and how they might be inspired by one another and be attracted to one another. So again, you can kind of see how they have more in common than Strickland perhaps had with his girlfriend. And they would have several opportunities to bump into one another, such as at bike racing events, which would facilitate this on-again, off-again relationship. So my question is this on-again, off-again relationship, which is mentioned by Mo's friend Cash, is it mentioned by Strickland? Does he admit this in the affidavit? What do you think the answer is to that? Now, I've got to say, when I read the end of page 2 of the affidavit, and it reads as follows: Strickland advised he currently lives with his girlfriend, right? He lives with his girlfriend, Kaitlin Armstrong, a white female, not she lives with him, born on November 21, 1987. Maybe it's semantics, but anyway, Strickland stated they'd been dating for about 3 years, but briefly ended their relationship for 1 or 2 weeks in October 2021. So that's the first time that they kind of had a break, and it's less than a year ago. Then the page ends, it terminates with these words: during Armstrong and Strickland's break. And then I kind of thought, where's the next page? Is it missing? I thought the next page would either be about breaking up or his relationship with Mo. Instead, it kicks off about him purchasing 2 firearms. And so for a while I thought, wow, is there a page missing? Has something been redacted? But it's basically just is that during Armstrong and Strickland's break, Strickland admitted to purchasing 2 firearms between December 2021 and January 22. And what that's telling you, so if you take that verbatim, during his break, he bought 2 firearms between December 2021 and January 2022. That is basically indirectly saying that there was a second break, right? The second break was over Christmas and New Year, which is quite a kind of a critical time. And that is now bringing it quite close to the present. It's now less than 5 months away. And so that kind of experience is going to be ringing and ringing in the mind and the heart of Kaitlin if she's thinking about trying to get serious. She's trying to find ways to keep the relationship on track and put out fires, right? And so she probably felt all sorts of angst over the relationship and paranoia. Maybe she really loves this guy. 3 years is around about the right time to become... To sort of make the decision, are you going to be in it for the long haul or do you call it quits, right? And I think when someone is having an on-off relationship with someone, the third party can actually feel those fluctuations in commitment and attention, and in the most primary sense, in love. Love fluctuates. And even if you don't know it's happening, I think you can feel that it's happening. So that brings up the question, who is really culpable in this? Is it Mo for not backing off from Colin? Is it Colin for not being faithful? Or is it Kaitlin for allegedly pulling the trigger and ruining possibly all 3 of their lives? What do you guys think? Now, what I want to look at now is how Strickland's statement gels with what he told the cops in the affidavit when he wrote the following: I am reeling from grieving Mo Wilson's death and from the facts that have emerged during the investigation. I cannot begin to imagine the pain felt by Mo's family and her close friends. There is no way to adequately express the regret and torture I feel about my proximity to this horrible crime. I am sorry, and I simply cannot make sense of this unfathomable tragedy. Although it will be a matter of small consolation to anyone else who cared for Mo, I want you to know that I've cooperated fully with investigators ever since I learned the terrible news, and I will continue to do so until some form of justice is served. Well, one way that you cooperate fully is you disclose all information. So does he tell the police that he had a relationship with Mo, or does somebody else tell him that? And that, I think, is something one needs to ask. Then he also says, as a point of clarification to facts previously reported, Mariah Wilson and I had a brief romantic relationship from late October. So right after he talks about I'm cooperating, he says he wants to clarify that he did have a relationship in late October, early November. And isn't that when he was not with Kaitlin? So it wasn't as though he broke up with Kaitlin and nothing was going on. It was literally when he broke up with her, he was with Mo, right? So you've got to see that in a direct sort of binary opposition, and that is obviously going to affect this third party. He also talks about it spanned a week or so while Wilson was visiting Austin. It's quite interesting that he refers to her as Wilson. Then he says, at the time, she and I both recently ended relationships. She returned to her home in California, and about a month later, Kaitlin and I reconciled and resumed our relationship. This is very different from saying they had an on-off relationship. On-off suggests it's on, then off, then on again, then off again. This suggests that there was just a once-off fling or something. He says, since then, I often saw Mo at cycling events and always in public settings. We both competed in Bentonville, Arizona, Stillwater, and Monterey, California. We also met for a 4-hour training ride in Santa Cruz after the See Other Classic in Monterey. After our brief relationship in October of 2021, we were not in a romantic relationship, only a platonic and professional one. It was not my intention to pursue along an auxiliary romantic relationship that would mislead anyone, which is kind of a fancy way of saying that I wasn't cheating. I mean, think of those words, auxiliary romantic relationship, that I wasn't having a relationship on the side. He says, Mariah and I were both leaders in this lonely niche sport of cycling, and I admired her greatly and considered her a close friend. I'm deeply grieving her loss. So what do you think of the sincerity of this message? As far as I'm concerned, it is quite sincere. He does say he's sorry. He does say he regrets it. But is he being completely forthcoming in this particular post? And I think one can apply that same question to when he spoke to the officers. Was he being completely forthcoming there? So I'm not going to take it further than that, but in the next episode, I want to talk about Strava, which is a social media app used by athletes. I use it, so I'm going to share how it works, what it looks like, and how it plays an important part in this particular case. We're going to look at maps, we're going to look at profiles, we're going to look at how this played a very important role in the fabric of this particular case. And it's probably something you don't know about. It's probably a social media thing that's quite new to you. It was certainly quite new to me as recently as about 2 years ago. So I'm going to be taking you through that in the next episode. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.